Hello, hello, hello. I think we are live. Can you guys, if there's anyone already here, you let me know if you can hear me all right and if you can see the screen. All right. Cool. Awesome. Hey guys. Right, so we are good to go. Welcome to the stream, and hopefully, we get to do some interesting stuff today. I had some plans. We'll see how we go. Um, we'll see how we progress. Awesome. So I just thought, to be honest, I didn't have like anything planned, but then I got a notification, kind of like with some photos and trailers of the new Marvel. I think it's its own thing. I haven't watched much, but I think it's its own thing with the Skrulls from Captain Marvel. So I thought, that sounds like a good concept type of character slash creature that we can work on. So yeah, we're gonna work on that and see how it progresses, and hopefully, yeah, we can show you some cool techniques for detailing or poly painting, all sorts of good stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and start straight away, just so that we can have something a bit better than just a sphere, so that we can talk about it. And by all means, if you have any questions or anything like that, put it in the chat. I have it just right next to me, so I can check that out. And I think, yeah, YouTube's working, Twitch and Facebook. Perfect. Yeah, cool. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and start with the head, but before I do actually the head, I just wanted to show you guys the uh, something that I tried the other day, and it's just a very simple process to generate your own assets, like your own kind of like humanoid blocking characters. And I'm sure you've seen that online, like these characters that have they're not, well, they're characters, but it's kind of like a humanoid mesh made out of a bunch of different pieces. That's a blocking character, and then you can start moving all those pieces and create or adjust it to create your own character. So those are really cool, and ZBrush comes with a bunch of those as reference. Like that's the equivalent to the mannequins, for example. But I thought I should just show you like a simple technique to create your own, and it takes just a couple of minutes to build your own base meshes and blocking base meshes basically, and then you can just create whatever character you want from there. So I'm going to show you how to do that very quickly, because it might be something that I can use for, let's say, the torso or the arms or something of this character that we're going to work on, the Skrull. So I'm going to go to the Lightbox and go to project, and I'm using the latest version of this of ZBrush 2021.6.6, and that one comes with a few projects, including these male and female projects, and those are really cool base meshes that have subdivision levels and a simple topology that you can reuse. But you can also use this project to create another project for yourself, like another base mesh to block in a new project. If you don't have access to this one, or you have a previous version of ZBrush, you can use something like the demo soldier, or you know even in the tools you should have the Nick Zuccarello's humanoid character, or any of these, right? So in fact, let's just use one of these one. I'm gonna use Nick's character just to load it up quickly. So here we go. This is the character. This one comes with some layers, so I'm just gonna bake everything, and I'm just gonna let's just hide the rest. All right, so this is the mesh, or the subtool that comes with that subtool, and it has a super clean topology, so you can use this as a base. If anything, we can actually use this as a starting point, now that I think of. So yeah, we can use this as a starting point for the scroll thing, but I just wanted to show you, like, in case you didn't want to use something like this, or you want to create your own basic base meshes for any character. I want to show you how to do that. So what I'll do actually is I'm going to clone this thing, and I'm gonna delete a couple things here. Sorry if I think I'm getting a little bit sick, so I sound a little bit more nasally than usual. Yeah, I'm gonna leave this one and this two. Yeah, okay. So I just cloned the full body, and I have a single subtool in here. So I'm gonna remove the, or just hide the polyframe, and the technique really is super simple. So the whole idea of blocking or creating an asset to use later on, like a blocking, is basically to separate it into pieces that then you can move easily. So hang on, there's something wrong here with my controller here. Give me 1 second, I'll be back. I'm just gonna reset this thing because it's annoying me. It's in the other monitor. Just give me 1 second. All right, all good. All right, so as I was saying, the whole point is just to create your own basic assets. So in fact, let's turn this back on, and I'm just gonna give it a single polygroup, group visible. And if you have multiple subdivisions, you can do the same thing. So I'm just gonna subdivide this and delete lower, just in case, just so that you know it's just it could be even a Dynamesh. But basically, from this thing, we can bring in something like this slice curve, and that basically, if you hold Control and Shift, you can just slice through the model, right, and create multiple polygroups. So this one doesn't work with symmetry even if you activate it. Let's go on to that. And the whole point is just to subdivide this mesh in the pieces that you want to use or that you want to keep as the base for reusing, right? So I'm going to take the hands, for example. I'm going to do that, right? So I just cut that. Oh, maybe be careful because it does go like in a kind of like an infinite way. So Control Shift, and you can hold the Alt key twice or press it twice. Sorry. Again. I'm gonna do it again. Control Shift, tap twice on the Alt key. There we go. So that's gonna generate these two polygroups. Then I'm gonna do the same thing around here. So Control Shift, double tap app, Alt. Sorry. Just so it doesn't cut through everything. I'm gonna do the same thing here. Control Shift, Alt, cut there, and maybe another one here. And that's if you want to have maybe not that much. This is if you want to have some kind of like sphere or piece for just the shoulder independently from the rest of the arm. And every time that I do this, is generating a new polygroup, right? So I have all of these, the green polygroups. Kind of hard to see, but they're all different. I'm gonna do the same thing for the head. Actually, let's separate the neck. Right? I'm not too worried about the other side. I'm gonna do a mirror and then a mirror and well. So I'm just concentrated on the right hand side. Let's separate the head. And maybe something here for the rib cage, something like that. And for the belly. And I'm gonna go ahead and cut this into these pieces. the knee, and the ankle as well. All right, so I think that looks all right. Now, what I'll do is I'm going to bring in the selection tool, and I'm going to make sure that I have the right groups. So I'm going to hold Control and Shift. I'm going to assign a new group, just so that you guys can see the difference a bit better. This one as well. And I'm going to, for some reason, I had these two polygroups, so I'm going to unify this together. Group visible. And yeah, I think that's it really. So I'm gonna mirror and then mirror and weld, right? And I'm gonna make sure that, for example, the legs are separate polygroups because they're very close together. So auto group, and that's about it. I mean, you can do the same thing that I'm about to do even further. Like you can just take the fingers and you can do the same thing. Just cut them into every phalange and every piece, and that's basically creating the base mesh or the separation for all of the pieces. But once you've done that, like I said, this only takes a few minutes. Once you've done that, it's just easy as I'm gonna show you, because I have it here on my UI, but for you guys it would be on the geometry, and it would be the Dynamesh palette. Here we go. So you can go ahead and Dynamesh like right now, and ZBrush is gonna simplify this mesh obviously quite a bit, right? But it's gonna unify everything basically. And you can just control how much resolution you have from the resolution tab. Again, Dynamesh. So this is pretty straightforward. So the trick here is once you have established those polygroups, right? Just with the slicing of whatever you want, you can click on groups in Dynamesh, and let's set it to 200 and whatever. Click on Dynamesh, and now ZBrush is basically Dynameshing every single group separately, right? So if I hold Control and Shift and select, let's say, the chest, you see it's a single piece that is a solid piece, right? So the next step for me would be to polish everything. So you can just polish all of those pieces a few times, right? And now we have like basically those, like very similar to those base meshes that you see that you can get online for to block out a character. So the great thing about this is that you can use the move tool with the move topological. Sorry, well, you can use the move tool as well, but the move topological to with symmetry to basically adjust the placement of those things. Maybe isolate the shoulder and smooth it a little bit more, make it a bit more of a rounded shape like that. But that's kind of like the next step. So this is what I would do to generate my own kind of like base meshes if I need to. It's a very simple process, and you can adjust it the way you want to. So obviously, see the hand is pretty messy. I'm just gonna use the inflate brush here and then redynamesh everything. And because we have the groups, it's gonna keep everything together. And this is what I meant about you can also subdivide the fingers, and then that way when you run the Dynamesh with groups, it's automatically gonna keep them separately. But yeah, other than that, this is kind of like how you can create your own base meshes. And the good thing about this one is that you can produce a bunch of different like body shapes and yeah, different base meshes. So if you're doing something like a big Hulk bulky guy, you can, for instance, let me just do something quickly here. You can mask everything but the upper torso. And start doing this sort of stuff. So now I masked out the arms, and I can just inflate the whole thing just to make it a bit more, bulkier. And of course, then use the same idea of the move topological and symmetry. And start working on some of the suggestions of the muscles and just make it a bit more, obviously, something that resembles more like one of those, bulky, massive creatures or characters. So just exaggerating the trapezius there. Very, very bulky, fat neck, or not fat, but muscular. Maybe more like a chisel jaw. The head actually could be smaller, so right. So hopefully you see how this is pretty helpful. But it's all about cutting up whatever you have in pieces and then simplifying it to some of the basic shapes. And then once you have these, let's say if you organize the shapes in the way that you want to for like a bulky guy or a more stylized character, whatever you want, you can save these as multiple subtools or multiple tools, in the tool folder and just bring them at any point. So if I want to work on a character like this, I would bring my asset that I build myself and then remove the groups in Dynamesh or keep it whatever you want. I'm just gonna group visible and Dynamesh that. And now I can, smooth things out and start working on defining some areas to work a little bit more on the, on the real thing, basically. But you have those base meshes. So you can do as many as you want. And this is a really fun way to build your own assets as well. Anyway, it's also a pretty good way to practice anatomy, I suppose. So yeah, that's something that I wanted to show you before we actually start doing what we're supposed to be doing, or not supposed, but what I thought we could do. So let me see the chat and nah, hopefully not COVID. Do you have problems unable to record brush stroke? No, I haven't actually had that problem before. Do I use a Cintiq? Yes, I'm using the Cintiq 24-inch Pro. I think that's the name. Yeah, Touch. Cintiq 24 Pro Touch. That's the name of the one that I'm using. Is the one? It's not the newest one. It's the one that still comes with the EK remote control, which is super handy. I think the new ones come with the buttons already on the screen. I prefer to have the separate control. Difference between this 22, 24-inch is not much, to be honest. Does it get hot? Or nah, I don't feel it gets hot at all. And in terms of the noise, I'm not too concerned. Most of the time, I just have music in the background as well, and I don't know. It's not something that bothers me. But yeah, it's because it doesn't bother me. It's not like something that I can pay attention to tell you that it is actually something that would matter. All right, so let's go ahead and take a dynamic sphere now, so we can get started with this idea of the scroll. And I'm gonna go ahead and start from scratch. I was gonna use this body, but yeah, I think I'm gonna start from scratch. So I'm gonna use a move brush, vacuum curve. So this is pretty much all I use to get started with a base mesh or to block in the whatever I'm doing. Also the masking brushes. So and I have symmetry enabled. So I'm gonna go ahead and mask an area for the neck. So that's gonna be a rough indication of the neck. Redynamesh. Right? And then I'm gonna go ahead and mask from the side, somewhere around the middle of the sphere and somewhere there, right? And this is gonna be the like the face basically. So I can center that. I'm gonna flatten it a little bit. You see, this is gonna look a little bit weird um, to start with, but it's just a very quick and an easy way to block in a shape like that from the side with Dynamesh, and then from the front, we can either use, the smooth brush, or if you want to have like something a bit more stylized or easy to identify the planes, you can also use the trim or the clip brushes. So you can clip something like that. I'm just gonna keep it simple because I'm gonna smooth everything out anyway, and use the move brush to adjust the shapes. Maybe we can turn on perspective as well. But just a lot of move brush really. At this stage, there's not a lot of brushes that I use. All right. I'm going to increase the resolution a tiny bit. And the next thing that I like to do almost straight away when I have something as rough and as basic as this is to bring something like the eyes if I'm doing a character or working on something like a character, like a creature or something like that. Because the eyes are really important to, or they're really good anchor points to determine the rest of the proportions of the face. Between like the distance between the eyes and the top of the head, or the eyes and the lips, and that sort of thing is really good. So the eyes for me, and plus is kind of like the most important feature sometimes when, at least in a humanoid face or a human face, that's the first thing that you look at. So establishing that first is a lot easier to figure out the rest if you have that as an anchor point, as a visual anchor point. So you can append, any sphere or whatever you want to use. I just been using the macro that comes with the newest version of ZBrush, and it's just pretty easy. So in the macros, you should have access to this. You can click on append eyes, and ZBrush is gonna basically bring in a sphere mirrored and welded, and creates a subtool with the plastic material and a dark color. So that's exactly what I want. I'm gonna bring in the gizmo, and I'm gonna use the local symmetry so that I can scale it based on the local symmetry. I'm gonna bring that closer. Just gonna make it a bit smaller. Something like that. And the way that I'm determining the size of the eyes is basically they should have, or roughly there should be like 5 eyes that fit within the width of the face. So it's kind of like, I'm eyeballing it, but roughly. And then I'm gonna push that in. Okay, and go back to the face. And now that I have those anchor points, I can start establishing things like the forehead, the nose, that sort of thing. So I'm gonna bring the forehead closer. So I'm gonna mask that area, invert that, and maybe just bring in that forehead like that. and smooth things a little bit. Same thing for the nose. I can just mask an area for the nose like that. Make sure it's not masked at the back. Bring in the gizmo, and I'm gonna just push that like so, maybe rotate it, scale it. Remember, at this point, we're just using Dynamesh. It doesn't matter if you intersect polygons and that sort of thing. With Dynamesh, and I'm gonna use the move brush just to push things in a bit, so that I can see more of the eyes, and then just start pushing a little bit more for this, for the area of the mouth. And I'm gonna exaggerate just because of the nature of the character that we're trying to build. Like, it's just gonna be my own version of my take on the Skrulls, basically. But they have like this pretty pronounced chin, something like Thanos. All right, not Dynamesh. So we have a pretty solid base to get started with. The next thing that I would do is I'm gonna push in kind of like the ocular cavity, like where the skull would be for the eyes. I'm gonna push that in, and then I'm just gonna bring in or create something else for the eyelids, which is a pretty cool or simple technique. All right, so I'm gonna take something like the clay brush, hold the Alt key, and that sort of pushes in that area for the eyes, and smooth that out. All right, you can exaggerate it a little bit more, something like that. And what I'll do is I'll take the same spheres for the eyes, but I'm gonna duplicate them, right? And I'm gonna turn off the polypane thing. So that's the one that shows the plastic and black color, the plastic material and the black color. And with those selected, I'm gonna also turn off the head for the time being, enable transparency so that you can see the duplication and the actual eyes. And I'm gonna bring in the Gizmo 3D, and I'm gonna increase the thickness. So basically, this thickness that you can see here, the difference between the new brush, the new spheres and the eyes, that's gonna determine the thickness of the eyelid. And that's one of the things that I see often as well online on characters. And sometimes the eyes, the eyelids especially, are like really thin. But if you look at like a reference of like a human face, like a real face, a photo, the eyelids are actually pretty thick. It's just that it's an illusion that maybe they're really thin. I don't know, but they're actually really thick. So I like to start with something thicker than what I would end up with, just because I tend to use the smooth brushes quite a bit, so that would reduce the volume. So this is gonna be the eyelids, and again, I'm exaggerating things a little bit, and that's it. And I'm gonna go ahead and hide one. There we go. And I'm also gonna delete it. So I'm just gonna work on one side. It's just a lot easier for the next step. So delete hidden. And I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate that one. Right? So we have two spheres that live in the same space, slightly bigger than the eye. So the first one is gonna be the top lid or top eyelid. And I'm gonna use the same brushes that I used before when I show you kind of like the creation of that sort of base mesh. So the clip brush, and I'm gonna clip with a little bit of a curvature. So when you start creating this line with the Control and Shift key, you can press Alt and you can create kind of like points in a Bezier curve, and that creates that sort of shape. So I'm gonna do that again. And I'm going to select the other sphere, right? And I'm gonna do the opposite. So I'm gonna hang on, I'm gonna do Control Shift, and that's it. So now I can remove the transparency, and I have like this thing, you know, that I can redynamesh and work, but I do have the different separate options. So this is how it's going to look. Which right now it looks like someone punched me in the face. So I'm gonna dynamesh this guy, and I'm gonna smooth this bit. I'm gonna select this one as well, dynamesh it, and smooth it. And this is the reason why I mentioned I like to exaggerate the difference, because I use the smooth brushes quite a bit. All right, but now that I have that, they're separate objects, so it makes it a lot easier to generate the shape of the eye. So I'm gonna use the move topological. You don't have to, because they're separate. You can use the move brush because they're separate subtools. And I'm just gonna work on the shape of the eyelid a little bit, and then go to the one at the bottom. And a bit of overlap in there. All right, so now I have those two, and what I can do is merge these two together, or all of them actually, so except the eyes. So I'm gonna go ahead and merge down, okay, merge down, okay. So now this is a single mesh. We can mirror and weld that. So now we have both sides, and this is pretty exaggerated again, but it is a good starting point to refine, and you'll see in just a second. It will refine that. We'll refine that quite a bit. But we can basically maybe increase a tiny bit the resolution so that we can describe these crevices a bit better, and redynamesh maybe a bit more actually. Now we can start. There we go. Let me see. Yeah, I think this is fair enough. We can start polishing things. Yeah, so now I'm just gonna start smoothing things out. Or we can use, I have this macro that smooths things out like 5 times, especially when you have multiple or a high resolution. But that's the basis of it. So what I'll do is establish or block out other pieces before we get into more details, or before we establish some other, areas of the face. So I'm going to use the same technique that I used before, just to create, let's say, the ears, for example, and that's just creating, blocking it out using other meshes. So in fact, we can use the eyes as well. So I'm gonna duplicate that, move that out of the way, and place that around there. So these are gonna be the ears. Okay. And they have these pretty cool elongated ears. So I'm just gonna use the same thing that I've been using with a sphere, redynameshing, or enable dynamesh, and then redynamesh it every time that I need to. And I do have like some references that I collected here before we started the stream. I'm just looking at those, and just in case you don't know what I'm doing or what I'm talking about, I just got like some screenshots from the from that thing that I was telling you about, the scroll thing. So this is the Skrulls from the Marvel universe. So they're in Captain Marvel, and I believe there is going to be a new series. I didn't know that, so I'm just working on something like that. And those are the references I have here next to me. So I'm just looking kind of like at the shape of the ear. It's pretty interesting because it's not it's very well defined. So basically, the helix is separate from the rest of the. I'll show you. It's hard to explain just by talking about it. So I'll actually just show you. And again, I'm trying to make my own version of it, so it's going to be slightly different than the reference. So this is what I mean. So this area, it's kind of like separate, or it looks more separated than the actual. I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense. Okay. So what I'll do now is I'm going to increase the resolution a tiny bit for the ears. Let me just bring them closer to the skull and sort of connect that a bit more. All right, so I'm going to increase the resolution a tiny bit. And I'm going to use the damp sander brush to very quickly define some of these important lines. Redynamesh that. All right, so you see it's a pretty simple way to block things out. We're going to get to the volumes and adjusting things in just a bit. Just want to make sure I have the block out ready. And for the mouth, it has a pretty particular shape as well. And I want to work with a mouth that is kind of like it's going to be a closed mouth, but I wanted to show you as well like the mouth back. Maybe we can do that later on. So for the mouth, for me, the way that I block things out for the mouth, for example, in creatures and characters is just super easy, super rough, and then just spend the time working on the volumes. But it's a very simple way. So I just define an M shape and then a U shape, and then just work on that. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So I'll take something like the damp sander brush, holding the Alt key, and go ahead and do something like this, and that's gonna be my M. Again, this is too exaggerated for the character, so I'm just gonna do something like that, like an M, right? So the shape of a letter M, but a little bit more exaggerated, and then like a U shape, like that, maybe like that, and then just refine the rest. Right, so that's gonna be the the mouth. Doesn't look great. Like I said, it doesn't really go with the character. But before I do that, I need to have a bit more of volume, because from the side, this is what doesn't look great. So what I can do is, you know what? Let's define it the way that I showed you, and then we add the volume. So I'm trying to find a good. It's not gonna look like that. Again, this is just a purely a marking to have as a reference. Yeah, something like that. All right, so that's where the mouth is going to be. And now I can just go ahead and take the move brush, for example, and start pushing this out, the whole thing a bit. And smooth that out. All I'm trying to create is just as a reference, and then I'm gonna exaggerate a lot of the things and work on the real volumes. But I think as a starting point, this works. Let's go ahead and define the actual mouth a bit better. Right, and that allows me to sort of work on the volumes, because this is just a marking, a reference, and I can do the same thing for things like the nostrils here, and then work on the volume. But yeah, this is a pretty pretty good starting point to create this this character. But it's gonna be really rough, or is pretty rough at the moment. Just gonna define some lines in here to suggest the neck muscles, and it's quite stylized as well. But now that I have this as a starting point, I can start bringing other brushes and create more volume. So with the standard brush, for example, I can pay special attention here for this cheekbone or the zygomatic arc. That's more pronounced, especially in these characters. They also have like the jawline or this masseter muscle pretty well defined as well. So that makes it look like it has a pretty big chunky, yeah, the jaw is pretty chunky. And every time that I do something like this, just like adding volume, I go ahead and use this smooth brush every time just to make sure everything is clean, especially if I'm doing something like that, that I want to maintain the stylization a little bit more. And another important part of this process, let's say I'm going to define some areas here for the cranium. But another important part of this process, or not the process, but that helps me maintain an eye on certain parts of the anatomy, let's say. Again, it's just defining different anchor points. So the glabella point, it's like super important for me, at least, to just get it right, because I think just changing the way that the shape of this area of the nose, at the top of the bridge of the nose, the glabella thing, is just it changes the expression quite a bit. I'll show you why. So if I do something like this is kind of like what I would do. I will define that with a plane with a trim dynamic. Maybe we can mask this out and do this. And depending on how you do this and how you define this, that part of the face or the skull, it can change the expression. I don't know if you can see this. Now it likes he's more of a kind, has a more of a kind look to it. So that's, to me at least, is very important to set this right first, and then I can start working around and working on the expression later on. But that's the type of things that I would do. Again, here I'm just gonna flatten all of this temporal lobe. So with the trim dynamic, that's all I'm doing, just kind of like define the planes a bit more. But that's it. I can also use the move brush, and I'm gonna start defining, bring this in closer and start shaping the nose a bit better. Because right now it was just that extrusion that we created before. And I'm gonna also bring in maybe the clay brush to add more volume. So this is the one that I will use for the nostrils at this point. And also to add volume to this indication of the lips. And the lips are gonna change quite a bit. You'll see over time they evolve, but we have something working already. All right. So right now this looks like some kind of, I don't know, a mix between the Green Goblin and Piccolo Daimaku from Dragon Ball. So I'm gonna try to bring this closer to the actual character that I want to create, because they have like some particular things in the anatomy that makes them, very, very particular. So this kind of like the fat area here of the eye is pretty pronounced. So what I'll do is I'm gonna define this a bit more. Just the difference between the top eyelid and the eye. But I'm gonna use the masking brushes to keep this, this area really, really sharp when I bring in, when I bring the that sort of fat, bring that in, so that maintains that really sharp line. Um, by the way, guys, I don't know if you've seen this. I sent an email. If you're part of my email list, I just sent an email before I started this stream, letting you know that the Extra Mile course, which is the big course that I have online, it's open for enrollment now. So if you're interested, you can go ahead and check the 3D Concept Artist website. This one. So if you go to the 3dconceptartist.com, you can just click on this button and it will take you to that website of the Extra Mile, and you can enroll already. So I opened enrollment for 4 days. So you have 4 days and 14 hours to join. It's pretty short because I'm like under the pump with a bunch of other stuff that I need to complete and some deadlines. Yeah. So if you're interested in the Extra Mile, which is my biggest kind of like course that I have online, which is a community and everything that it's included, feel free to go in here and then join us if you are interested in the Extra Mile. I only open these a few times a year when I have time, when I have a chance to dedicate to the new students. So this is kind of like the time of the year. And if you're interested, just wanted to let you know that the Extra Mile is open. And by all means, if you have any questions, not only about what I'm doing right now on the screen, but about the course or anything else that I do online, feel free to put them in the comments as well in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer that. All right, so you see those volumes here on the eye, that gives a bit more of a it brings the character closer to what we're trying to do. So there's like pretty particular shapes around the eyes, as well as the way that the kind of like the jaw flows into the neck a little bit. So it has like all of these shapes. So we're gonna get to those in a second, but I do want to have a stronger chin and like bigger, and that's kind of like the point of this next step, is just to bring the character closer to what we're trying to do, really. And also refine the profile now that we're here. But as you can see, a lot of move brushes, a lot of tweaks at this stage before moving into details or anything like that. Just like to get this part right before moving to anything else. It says that the Extra Mile is closed. Now it should be open. It is open. And let me just paste the link. So if you go to that website that I linked to, it should open. It should be open. If it's not, that's a bit of a concern, but it should be. I made sure of that. Like I literally manually opened it, so that's why I'm pretty sure it was open. Let me know if you cannot see all the info, but it should be there. All right, so what I'm doing here, it's more of the same really. Just working on the volumes. I use the clay brush just because it gives me control and maintains the smoothness of the surface. Sometimes I also use the clay builder brush. It really depends on what I'm trying to achieve. But you know, this is a pretty good brush to generate this type of volumes, and then use the smooth brush to maintain the niceness of it. Okay, cool. Thank you. Thanks for letting me know. All right, so we have the, let's just do a quick save as well. We have the bases kind of like ready. I think we can just push the kind of like the exaggerate the chin a bit more and the jaw even further. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and maybe let's define the nostrils a little bit better. This is another thing that I do sometimes, just with the masking brushes, just literally mask what the nostrils would be. Invert the mask and bring in the gizmo, and then just push that up as well. Clear the mask, and actually before I do that, I'm gonna bring, oops, I'm gonna bring them closer. There we go. Clear the mask, and before I do anything, just do a bit of a inflate, then redynamesh the whole thing. Again, with a bit more resolution now that we have some more definition here for the eyes. And that's it. Definitely need more thickness in here with the inflate brush. And again, once you have the bases, when you have the kind of like the blocking of that part, or the nostrils or whatever, it's just a matter of like tweaking it with the move brush. You can bring in the clay brush as well. And because we already have kind of like this empty area or this hole, you can also enable backface masking so that if you press really hard to adjust this, it doesn't affect the other area. So it automatically creates that back-facing mask. Okay, so I think we're getting there. We might not have time to do a lot more for the body, but we can just leave that for the next stream. And we'll do something interesting with the clothing and that sort of thing. But just wanna get the face, at least the base of the face right. before we move forward. All right, so I'm gonna bring in the move brush with a large brush, and I'm just gonna try to adjust the skull a bit more and the general profile. Maybe the neck is like a bit too big. And maybe the position of the ears as well. Maybe they're also too big. So general adjustments, I suppose. And I'm also going to increase the dynamic resolution of the ears. Use the clay brush that I use with the same kind of like back face masking, so that I know I'm not affecting the back of the ear. And I'm just here looking at the reference of the ear. It's pretty, you know, pretty much like a humanoid ear, but they have some interesting pattern. So that's what I'm trying to replicate here. And I think this specific area, the helix here, is a lot stronger, more like bulkier at least. But the rest is pretty much the same. The same as a humanoid ear. So, alrighty, I'm gonna define this a bit better with the damp sander brush. And remember that I also increase the resolution so that we have more points to push in. And so these lines that before were kind of sketchy, they're a little bit better defined now, which is great. All right. Cool. So now that we have this, what I'll do is I'm gonna create, I'm gonna duplicate the face and, or yeah, the entire head. I'm gonna create a folder, and my keyboard is not working. The Bluetooth one, I forgot to charge it. So yeah, this is gonna be the original, and I can do the same thing for that. I tend to do this quite a bit, so just to keep the originals before I do something drastically different, in case I want to go back. Será? Hola, Pablo, me gusta mucho. Are you referring to the UI? Yep. So and again, I just duplicated the face, but the reason I did that is so that I can start defining a little bit more of those, you know, like secondary shapes and volumes. So I'm gonna maybe use the clay brush very quickly to define these volumes first, and then I'm gonna start working on the kind of like the lines that are super particular of this this character. But before I do that, I need to make sure that, you know, the volumes of the face are actually working. And then we can start using something like the clay builder brush. The clay builder brush gives you a lot more control. It just generates, I have my own custom brush here, generates a lot more of those striky lines, but that's why I also use the smooth brush every now and again. In fact, every time that I refine an area like this, then I go with the smooth brush. So here's where things have started to get a little bit more sculptural, I suppose. and the reason I also mentioned that the lips we're gonna change the shape, we're gonna change quite a bit. But yeah, not much to not much to say about this process. It's a lot more of the same, just um, adding or removing volume. You know, removing volume is equally important, and then just smoothing things out. That's it. Not much. There's no there's no trick or shortcut in here. It's just looking at the model from different angles, smoothing things out, adding volume, remove volume. That's it. So here's where I can start to get a little bit more in detail, or not detail, but refine these shapes of the eyelids. Because the way that I like to block things in, it's almost like an écorché, or the equivalent to like trying to do an écorché, where you have like a very well defined set of muscles and a set of bones, like a bony structure. That is a really good idea to do it as a blocking stage, right? When you're blocking things out, if you try to replicate or try to generate let's say the protrusions of the skull, or if you're doing the whole body, you know, like the acromion process here in the shoulder, or the sternum, like things that are very close, or parts of the body of the skeleton, sorry, that are very close to the skin. They're really good anchor points and visual aids to, yeah, just to make sure that you have the anatomy working. Um, but once you have that, for me at least, in terms of the appeal of a character and the sculptural part of the process, is concentrating on the fat rather than the muscle. Because if you do like perfect muscles, you're just gonna end up with any other character that is perfectly muscular, and is super lean, and it's cool, but it's just another écorché type of thing. So if you focus on the fat, and obviously the muscles are super important to have an understanding on it, but underneath, but the fat deposits and the skin, like the drapery of the skin and that sort of thing, that what gives it a bit more of realism. Because let's be honest, not everyone is as lean as an écorché. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to do, really. That's what I was trying to say. That now that I have those kind of like anchor points, those areas that I know are kind of like in place for the face, the next stage is for me to refine and add that fat that I mentioned, to make sure that there is there is another layer of mass between the skin and the muscle, or that the skin has thickness as well. So that's the whole point of what I'm trying to do now. I'm gonna add a little bit more volume here for the eyelid. And I'm gonna define this a bit better as well. I think the eyes are pretty human. It's not like anything weird other than the top of the eyelid. So should be pretty straightforward to recreate. And something I like to do as well, just to define the sharpness of the eyelid, is with the trim dynamic. I hide the eyes, and that's the reason I keep them separately, and then just do something like this, and then smooth that as well. So it's just gonna keep that very sharp line, which really helps. And that also allows me to see a little bit better, like defining that sharpness of the eyelid allows me to see the placement and the volume, so I can make sure that at least this has a more consistent depth and thickness all around. So it's a lot easier to see with that sort of flat line that I just did with the trim dynamic. Okay, I would spend a lot more time refining this, but I wanted to give you a bit more of a techniques rather than just sculpting. So I'm gonna go ahead and redefine the lips just with the damp standard brush and smoothing. And I'm gonna use the standard brush to add some volume for the upper lip. Yeah. So I'm kind of like doing the same M shape that I did before, but with the standard brush to define a bit the volumes of the top lip. And let's do the same thing for the bottom lip. And I'm gonna use the clay brush to add volume as well. And that's it. We can smooth everything and define the lips again. All right, so this is kind of like the base. If you want, we can just duplicate those changes and put them into the original. But I'm gonna take these now and start with my knife brush here, which is just an exaggerated version of the damp standard brush. As you can see, just a lot stronger. This comes with a pack that I have online. The clay buildup, sorry, the clay brushes pack comes with this knife brush. I use it to sort of like cut through the clay. But if you don't have that pack, if you want to get it, you can just go to the ZBrush Guides website and it's in there. If you don't have it, you can use for the next stage of what I'm gonna do. You can use what's the name? This /3, this one right here, right? This /3, it gives you a very, very similar effect. The difference between this and my custom brush is just a couple of settings that, for me, at least for my workflow, it just gives me a lot more control. But you can do the same thing with that, right? So with this, I'm gonna start kind of like working on the pattern in here. So I'm gonna try to find in the reference some lines that are pretty prominent. So I'm gonna start here from the top. So that's one. Just trying to figure out what the, I mean, I'm trying to follow the reference a bit so that you guys know who I'm or what type of creature I'm trying to do, what character. But I'm also trying to give it my own sort of like personal flair. So I'm trying to find a good balance between the reference so that you know who this is and my own personal, design, I suppose. So another one there. And again, these are just like points of reference, I'm gonna refine them and add volume and make some better difference between the shapes in here. But it's kind of like important to at least mark them in so that we know what to aim for. And these lines and these patterns, this is what I'm going to start like sort of trying to make my own or come up with my own kind of like design. So I'm going to do the one that's like super specific. So there's one obviously going from here to there roughly. But there's one that is kind of like a fat piece from here. So starting from here and there. There we go, something like that. So this one is pretty pronounced. The rest are not as pronounced, but they're also super prominent. There's gonna be one around there. So this is the lines that make it look kind of like part of the, I guess, the Thanos character. Okay, so I just marked those in. So now I'm gonna start working towards the bottom of the chin, and they sort of fade. They don't continue all the way in. They sort of fade like that. And this one is also pretty prominent, so just gonna mark that in as well. All right. So now it looks more like the character that I was trying to do. All right. So that's about it in terms of like blocking those lines in. Again, it's just using the same brush, and because I'm using those references, I can try to mimic where they're placed, but you can do whatever you want really. And I'll take some liberties as well of where to place those. But now that I have this, if I want to continue the refinement process, and this is going to be just a dynamic sketch, I'm not going to spend too much time, retopologizing or anything like that. I've done that in the past as well for in these ZBrush lives, so just going to keep it simple. But one thing I'd like to do is increase the dynamic resolution. So I'm going to make sure that everything is, relatively smooth before I do that, because now if I went ahead and smooth areas, that's going to take a little bit of time. So I'm going to increase the resolution quite a bit. So right now I have 1 million polygons. I'm going to redynamesh now. Now I have 3.7 millions, but the idea is to keep the definition of these lines that I just built. And some of them will fade, or as in, not fade, but slightly disappear as I start to refine the volumes, but we can come back and tweak them again. Fine. Oh, cool. Thank you. Yes. Sorry, I don't know what your uh, nickname is, but yeah, I would be happy to show more stuff about customizing brushes. Is really simple. Maybe I can do a couple more videos. I have an interesting video series coming up that hopefully is gonna be ready soon. Right now, I'm like fully focused on the new intake of the extra mile, so that's gonna take a little while to sort of like settle down. But as soon as I finish with the enrollment, which I'm planning to close at the end of the week, so in 4 days really, then I can start focus on the next set of tutorials, which I reckon are gonna be pretty cool. So what I'm doing now is basically the same thing that I did before with the clay brushes. In fact, now that we have more resolution, it would be better to go to brushes, go to smooth brushes, and I'm gonna bring in the smooth stronger. So that's allowing you to smooth things a lot faster, especially when you have a lot more resolution. But yeah, what I'm doing right now is just adding volume, smooth, and that is just to define those lines a little bit better. We can also use the trim dynamic or the H polish. We use the trim dynamic in this case to sort of flatten these things a bit and maintain slightly that stylization that I was originally going for. So this is what I mean about the lines will be fading as I adjust the volumes, but this is all part of the process. So I'm adding volumes at the same time. I'm kind of like fading or removing a little bit of the definition of those lines. But you know, we'll come back later and redefine them. The important part, at least for me at this point, is just to make sure that that they don't look just painted on, or like that you literally just took the damn standard brush and created those lines, but they're actually there is they look more like an indentation, and they feel part of the same yeah. Like for instance here, this doesn't look very good, like very, let's say, realistic. So you can use something like the clay brush. This is another trick. Well, not trick, but you can change the smooth brush to the smooth pix to respect a bit more of that. So you can combine, let's say, the clay brush or the clay builder brush. Sorry. Just gonna use mine because mine has less striky bits, like that, and then use the smooth pix to smooth that out, and that, you see, sort of like respects those lines a bit more if you want. So that's another way to do it. Maybe that's a good technique, let's say, for these areas right here, that sort of converge into this part of the face. So I'm just adding volumes, kind of like following the flow of the lines that I established, and because I have the smooth pix, it will protect or preserve some of those lines a lot more. But you know, again, there's no other than this kind of like little tips and techniques of which brushes I'm using and how I'm applying the sculpting strokes. Um, there's not much else to say about this process. It's more of the same. But you'll see the difference between this area, for instance, that I already tweaked in terms of volumes, and this one. They look super flat, right? So those lines that I created, they're not necessarily the lines, or I wasn't trying to define the lines, just purely a reference. But the actual crevice and the actual fold that you see, it is created by you know, like something maybe inside, or um, yeah, like something like a muscle or tendon, something pulling something inside, or the actual fat that I was talking about, sort of like converging in the same point, and just kind of like overlapping. So just creating some lines like this, that's not gonna create that level of believability, I suppose. So that's why this process is kind of like the important one, rather than, I mean, you can do this directly without creating the lines. For me, just building those lines as a reference makes it a lot easier, because I know that they're placed in the right place, that they're defined in the right place, and then I just go ahead and spend time adjusting the volumes. And this is quite relaxing as well, because you don't have to think much about the design, so you can be pretty close. I don't know if you noticed, but when I was doing the lines and everything else, like the rest of the face, I'd worked relatively far away, so you can constantly see the face. But now that I'm refining volumes and adjusting things like this, I can be, pretty close to the sculpt, because I don't have to judge proportions much, or the general idea of the design, because I know it's already kind of like working. So that's what I'm saying. It's a bit relaxing, because I can concentrate on just doing this, and this takes time. Um, I know a few sculptors, a few friends of mine that are super fast at this, and then just can create something really awesome very quickly, which it's super cool. But I personally prefer to do it, to take my time. Obviously, if I have the luxury of taking my time, just because I like it. I like this process of bit by bit refining things like that. If I don't have the luxury of time, as in if I have a deadline, or if I need to send a design or a concept um, to the art director, I do this process a lot faster, and that's why I sometimes come up with some custom brushes that allow me to work a lot faster with this process, um, or at this stage. But if I have the time, which, to be honest, that's one of the things that I like to do for these live lessons with Pixologic, is just take the time and work on something that first that you guys are interested in, hopefully, and then explore things as well for myself, or like take the time. All right. Let me know, guys, if you have questions in the comments. What I'll do is I'm gonna bring some water because I've been talking too much and I need to hydrate myself. I'm gonna bring some water, and then I'll come back and we maybe continue with this and wrap up everything with a nice set of with a quick pass of poly paint. All right. So I'll be back in 2 seconds. Okay, we're back. I'm still unclear about depth mask, which way is above and below. Is it a screen space or works world space? Of depth mask, you mean like this thing that I have here? It's nothing to do with screen space or world space. Well, it does have to do with world space. Basically on the which way the sculpture is pointing, but it's not world space or screen space. It's literally just surface. So right now this is building a lot of volume because this point, let's say that line. Let me just bring in something and I can show you. The easiest thing to think about it is this line right here. So that line right in the middle, that is the equivalent to the surface. Right, so that is the surface of the model. This is kind of like a clean cut. Right, so if I were to cut this, this is what you see here. This is like yeah, a vertical slice of it. This is the actual surface. The whole sphere that you see here, the circle, that is the brush. And this point right here is the center of the brush. Right? So you can change the depth mask and modify like the way that it works just by pushing this thing up and down. So I don't want to mess with mine, but let's just take the clay builder brush and duplicate that, clone that. So if I do a stroke here with this clay brush, you see it adds quite a bit of volume, but it can push this even further. And when I do this, it just builds a lot more volume because it's trying to apply the effect of the brush, but it's trying to apply it at a quite further from the surface, from the line. The same thing if I just push this in, is like not gonna be any effect because all the effect of the brush is happening below the surface. So there's nothing happening really. So if you put this right in the center, 0 or 1, that's gonna give you a pretty subtle effect because it's just adding a tiny bit of that alpha or that C intensity to the surface, right? So obviously this also goes hand in hand with the intensity here, because if I push this even further, to 100, even though this is at 1, it's going to be a lot stronger. So these are kind of like the settings for instance, the clay tube brush. So if I select the clay tube brush, you see this one is at 10, but it sort of has a similar effect. The intensity is a little bit higher, so you can basically recreate different brushes just by changing the depth mask. But it's nothing to do with the space the space world or anything else. Oh, I'm gonna undo that. Hopefully that makes sense. It's actually pretty easy once you get the hang of it. Just think about it as the circle is the actual brush, the line in the middle is the surface, and whatever you push that sort of the entire circle, that's how much depth you're gonna add to it. If you put it below, it's obviously not gonna have any effect unless you change to C sub, basically. So right now, if I push this below this, it's not gonna do any effect. But if I switch to Z sub, it's gonna do the inverted effect, basically. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and refine these volumes a tiny bit more before we get to the polypaint stage. And we can even redefine some of the lines. But if you guys have any questions, again, put it in the chat. This is a good time for me to answer other things maybe that are not necessarily related to this process, as I just go through these motions of repetitive actions. Um, Another thing that you guys might be interested in, if you're into like creature design, I recently finished a live workshop called the end-to-end creature workshop, which was super fun. It was an intensive week of, you know, ZBrush basically, and yeah, we had a lot of fun. But now that that sort of live lesson is finished, or the live workshop is finished, because it went really well and I got like really good feedback about it. Um, Everything went well in terms of the recordings. So we have all the steps and everything recorded. So I'm gonna turn that into an intensive course that I'm gonna make available. So if you guys are interested in creature design as well, and yeah, the overall process of producing concepts or creature concepts with ZBrush and Photoshop, that's also coming up pretty soon. So I'm excited to make that available to more people, because I think that the students and whoever participated in the creature workshop did like really amazing stuff. Um, and it was like super intensive. I mean, we created a full-on concept, like a final portfolio ready concept in 5 days. Of Well, not even 5 days. Like there were only 3 hours a day to create that concept. So altogether, 15 hours of to create a full-on final concept, which is pretty intense. Um, and we were having like a lot of fun. So it's not like strictly 3 hours a day. We actually went over most days, or all of the days. We just went over a few extra hours, because yeah, it was really fun. And if you want to check out the final concept, I put it in my ArtStation already, the one that I created from that workshop. All right, and I think I'm gonna kind of leave these little stripy things. Um, I'm not gonna make them super polished. Kind of like the imperfection for now, at least. Do you have any tips for converting subdivision quads to nerve surfaces for hard surface modeling? Mm, Quite a specific question. I wouldn't I wouldn't do nerves. I absolutely hate nerves. Well, that's not true, but I remember that's how I learned how to do modeling back in the day with Maya doing nerves, and it was a pain. So I have like a not the best feeling about nerves. So to answer your question, I don't have any specifics of like what you can do to convert a subdivision to nerves, because that's not something that I do. I treat the hard surfaces and this more organic things like what I'm doing right now exactly the same thing. It's just about the polishing. So what I would do is personally retopologize individual pieces of a hard surface. I don't know, a robot, whatever you're trying to do. Just retopologize individual pieces and then have a bunch of subtools, let's say in ZBrush, but you don't. I wouldn't convert them into nerves necessarily. So sorry, I don't have any tips for that. I don't follow that workflow, to be honest. Hey Frank, good to see you here. Been good. Feeling a little bit sick today, but I don't know. Hopefully it's gonna pass soon. And if you wanna check out something more like the hard surface stuff, or at least my process of the for the hard surface stuff, I've done quite a few streams with Pixologic, and in one of those there was a robot that we created. So maybe that will give you some ideas. Um, Also, if you want to just create a concept, there is a free workshop in the 3D concept artist, which is creating is the robot workshop, and that is super fun to do. It's like 5 days, 5 days, no, 3 days. Is it 3 days? yeah, 3 days. It's a 3-day workshop. It is free. You can just sign up for it, and I just walk you through the entire creation of a robot concept and hard surface modeling in ZBrush, and I share some of the techniques. But if what you're trying to do is more like you actually want to have like a super clean surface for whatever you're trying to do, maybe that's not it. Because I don't in that workshop, at least I don't polish the surface as much. I just do whatever's necessary for creating a cool concept. I don't worry about they're pretty clean, the surfaces actually, but I don't. They're not nerves. They are I forgot the name. Booleans. So there's like the result of booleans, most of those. So that's how I generate those interesting, hard surface patterns with the booleans. So not necessarily perfectly polished surfaces if you were to, subdivide them or do something with it. I don't know if that makes sense, but there are additional tips in there that you might find useful, and it's a free thing. A windstorm effect in Blender. Really? Are you sure it was me? A windstorm effect in Blender. I don't think that was me. I mean, I've been learning Blender, but I don't even have a tutorial about Blender or anything like that I've put out. Unless you're referring to something that I shared in my social media. That might be what you're talking about, but yeah, I've been working with Blender quite a bit, and it's an awesome software to do a bunch of, rendering stuff and texturing. But yeah, I'm not an expert. Like I'm doing things the wrong way, so I'm just having fun with it. All right, how are we doing with time? I have 20 minutes before my time is up. So I'm gonna do, like I said, a quick poly paint pass just to bring this guy closer to what I wanted. But there's a lot of refinement that I would probably do before moving forward with this guy. So we can leave that additional refinement process for the next stream and see if we can do some clothing and kind of like working on the rest of the guy. Just gonna show you one more technique. So with the mask lasso, for example, you can hold Control, mask these areas, kind of like to redefine some of these lines, like there. And then use something like the inflate or standard brush. I would use the standard brush to do this sort of stuff, and with the smooth brush, and that sort of kind of like create that's, I don't know, like the overlapping idea of a panel there. I'm gonna switch to the smooth strong as well, so that it's faster. Right, and you can do the same thing here, for example. In fact, let's go back to that area. I'm gonna invert that when we still had the mask. And do that. So that way we can concentrate on just this bit. So again, standard brush and smooth stronger. So that sort of make things stick out a little bit more. Again, this is pretty subtle, but it's a cool way to start polishing and refining areas. Same thing here, smooth brush. standard brush, smooth brush, standard brush, smooth brush. So more of the same. Clear that mask. And because I have this the smooth stronger, I can go over everything a little bit and just smooth things out a little bit more. Especially the line sort of fading into the rest of the skin of the body. Right, so you see, bit by bit, you can start refining things and make it look a lot better. And then you can also use, I'm going to use the knife brush to just, with a smaller brush, just sharpen all of this a lot more. Not everywhere. I want to kind of like maintain, I don't know, I'm not pressing as hard everywhere. So I'm pressing hard here, but not in here, and then just come back. And that, I don't know, that's sort of helps with the more realistic effect. Not everything is necessarily the same thickness, and yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's just a way to maintain that level of realism in a way. And this thing that I'm doing, you can do it with the damp standard brush as well. It's just for me, it's a lot faster with this custom brush because it's a stronger effect really. That's all there is. But it's the same idea. So just to save some time, that's what I would use this. Um, oh yeah, so it wasn't me. Yeah, that's what I thought. I've done some stuff with Blender that I've shared online, but nothing like I haven't done anything to do with like a fog. So yeah, it was a little bit, yeah, that's on me. But thanks for stopping by. This is slightly different. This is not Blender, by the way. This is ZBrush. All right, I'm gonna define a bit here how these lines sort of get into the lips. And you know, now that I have this already kind of like well defined in a way, I would use something like the damp standard brush. Like it doesn't mean that this brush that I'm using right now it's a complete replacement of that tool, because again it's super strong. So with the damp standard brush, I can come back and refine things like, let me just show you. Just want to make sure. Yeah, so with the damp standard brush, I can have a larger brush size, right? And that is going to push things. It's kind of like refining the volume once again. So I can do things like that with a soft, not pressing really hard, and a large brush of the damp standard brush, and then yeah, using the smooth strong, or we can switch to the smooth pix, for example. So it's kind of like adding wrinkles. Maybe here is a little bit easier to see. So I can do this with the damp standard, right? And start to create these additional wrinkle lines. That are not as pronounced as the ones that I just did, because those are kind of like feature lines in a way, but you still have the ability to define new areas to work on, and new areas to work on further, improve the volume. So like in this case. So here I'm gonna exaggerate that lacrimal area. Just define that a little bit better, and that's all using the damp standard brush. So yeah, I would use this this brush now to work on like other type of wrinkles, more like large, kind of like going back to that idea of redefining the secondary forms after adding those details of the lines, because there's a little bit, it's a bit more subtle, I suppose. That's what I'm kind of like going for. Especially here, maybe. Just going with lines across the neck here to indicate some kind of folds. This probably is gonna all be covered by the, if we do some kind of clothing or something like that. I don't know. We'll see. And we haven't worked much on the back of the head. So let's quickly, now we just don't have much time. So we might work on the rest later on. But so far it's kind of like looking good. I'm gonna do a quick save. And let's just give it a quick polypaint pass, just so that yeah, we can at least get the eyes. Whoops, I don't know what I did there. All right. Yeah, so that we can get the eyes closer to what they are in real, well, with the actual concept. So I'm gonna select this eye. I'm gonna get rid of the symmetry. Whoops. Select just one, delete it. So this is the same process that I did before for the eyelids. I'm gonna fill it with a skin shade 4, or actually let's leave the material as it is and just RGB fill object. I'm gonna subdivide this a few times until the specular light is, it's not as, there's not many artifacts, so we have plenty of resolution. So now I'm gonna enable the symmetry, radial symmetry in the y-axis, in the z-axis, sorry, because it's facing us. And with the standard brush, I'm gonna convert it into a painting brush just by disabling the CAD and enabling RGB. I'm gonna start painting a bit of the eye here. I'm gonna go for a pretty strong red color here, just to simulate kind of like the blood vessels, right? Like that. And the eyes are like this bright purple as well. So I'm gonna bring in first a dark black color, and I can increase the radial count to 16 or something, or maybe more, 32, whatever. 32 should be fine. Increasing the radial count increases the amount of like brush instances, so that allows you to create a more precise, let's say, circle in this case. So I can just do this. Let's see this. They have like larger pupils, right? I'm gonna go with a darker color towards the rim, and I'm gonna then find like a nice purpley color for the iris, and maybe work with 8 again, just to soften that up. All right, so I'm gonna go into solo mode. That's kind of like the basis. I'm gonna turn off symmetry. We can change the alpha to something like alpha 60, and that allows me to do this sort of like stripy areas. We can also use symmetry, to be honest. It's just a lot faster in this case. And start varying the hues a bit, so it's not all the same hue. Maybe some bluish highlights here and there. Darker lines as well. And we can also vary the amount of radial count, so that just creates a more organic, less symmetrical in a way. The key with this process, I suppose, is to try to go for odd numbers. So odd numbers like 3, 5, 7 in the radial count, and that just makes it less symmetrical. I'm gonna turn this off now and do some kind of like more feature lines. Again, this is a pretty quick pass, not the final one by all means, but yeah, something good to have an idea what this character is going to look like. It's kind of like a work in progress poly paint. Just gonna do a highlight here at the bottom, just with a lighter color, and this is just to fake the concave nature of the iris, and bring back the symmetry, radial count, dark color, and this is gonna be the pupil. Again, it has like a pretty large pupil, I suppose. There we go. So that's the eye. And for the face, is just gonna be a green color. So I'm gonna go for something. Whoops. Select the face, fill color, and the ears, fill color. Okay. So for the eye, what I'll do is also I'm gonna add some pretty dark, subtle color at the top as a way to add kind of like an ambient occlusion type of thing, or painting a little bit of the shadows in there, and that's just to integrate a little bit more. Other than that, you can bring in the gizmo, center that, adjust the the eye, give it a slightly, because I've been painting sort of like facing the camera, but there's going to be a slight rotation of the eye, and that's kind of like what also there are some interesting things about perception, like physical visual cues that allows you to it's a way to how you perceive the environment. So there's a couple of things that are really interesting about that with the eyes, well, like the physiognomy, I suppose, with the eye, the retinal disparity and the convergence. So if you put your eye in front, like not your eye, sorry, your finger in front of your eyes are physically rotating, like the muscles are actually moving towards it. And if you put your finger outwards, they will move away, right? Or just rotate. So the actual placement of the eyes is not necessarily facing forward completely. They have like this slightly rotation, but it's interesting because it's just it's like a physical thing that happens in your brain, that the brain detects that your your eyes, the lenses are moving towards the center or away from the center, and that sort of like automatically triggers the idea of like, oh, this object, if the eyes are sort of like converging towards the center, this object that you're focusing on must be closer and or not. So that's, I don't know, just like an interesting thing. So yeah, anyway, you can just put this the way you want it to. I think that one accentuates the expression of this guy. I'm gonna mirror and weld that. Whoops. I cannot do with multiple subdivision and I have local symmetry. So I'm just gonna duplicate that and I'm gonna delete, lower, mirror and weld. So this one has no subdivision and this one is the original. That's it. That's all I'm going to do. For the face, I'm gonna go with the move brush and I'm just gonna adjust this. And in fact, I'm just gonna bring this closer with the clay brush. This is gonna be kind of like the lacrimal. So just gonna add a bit of volume here. Quickly refine that. I think that's fine. And then with the standard brush. Not with the standard, sorry, with the damp standard. But yeah, we can go ahead now that we have the pupils. Again, that's a really important kind of like visual cue, an anchor point for the rest of, you know, at least the shape of the eye and that sort of thing. So I can just go ahead and bring this up closer. Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and paint this very quickly. Just give it a very rough pass to this guy. So with a darker green color, maybe a yellowish. Maybe go towards the blue tones when you go to the darker tones. So this is establishing the palette very quickly. I'm gonna add some darkness here as well. And then we can bring in a different, the brush spray, for example, and a different alpha. I'm gonna also, in the stroke palette, I'm gonna remove the color a bit more. All right, so yeah, I'm gonna use maybe like a darker green, and I'm not pressing hard at all. But this is also kind of like a way to generate these very subtle variations in hues. Now obviously I'm pressing a lot harder, but it just variates the, let's say, the albedo or the diffuse color, which is the important part of creating like a more realistic skin. There is actually a tutorial in the ZBrush guides, if you're interested, where I cover how I polypaint realistic skin for a character with polypaint. So if you're interested in that, you can go ahead and check that out from the ZBrush guides website. So I'm just basically using the same principles here. So the whole point is, for me at this stage of blocking the color, is just variate the hues and the brightness of the albedo color or the base color, just to you know, make it more interesting and more realistic, I suppose. It's kind of like a mix between, it's like a semi-stylized character, I suppose. I'm gonna go for some yellowish, not that much yellowish tones here for the top, maybe with a different alpha 40. So that's just gonna add some like molting. So if I go to flat, you'll see it's just like these little dots that are generated with this, you know, very tiny alpha. And I'm not, again, not pressing really hard, so it's all about the subtleties when it comes to texturing. At least, you know, same, at least with a humanoid skin, really. It's very subtle, but there's a lot of variation, a lot of richness. If you zoom in a high res photo, there's a lot of things going on. So this is what I'm trying to fake in a way. Just try to create something that there's a lot of variation, even though at at simple, like if you just see this guy from the distance, like, oh yeah, it's a green color, but in reality there's a lot of variation to it. I'm gonna turn off the symmetry so that I can blur that center line and make it a little bit more asymmetrical as well. Maybe some pinkish hues here for the lips. And we're getting closer. So this is like the texture itself is green. All of this color that I'm adding, faking, this is the reason why I say this is kind of like a work in progress poly paint, just to get us closer to the design. But in reality, this color that I'm painting, that would be just the color of the subsurface scattering on the skin. So the whole skin, the whole poly paint might be just green. And then if you were to render this in a some kind of ray tracing renderer that has the ability to have a material with subsurface scattering, you would add this type of color that I'm actually painting as the absorption color, for example, and that way, yeah, you can generate that variation in tones, but it's more the property of the material. What I'm painting basically is the property of the material rather than the true nature of the color, if that makes sense. What's the best method to crack the mesh in ZBrush? Um, well, I don't know. It's interesting question. I would say, I would use. It depends again. It depends on what you try to do. So, like, if it is not something that is super visible or that it's not gonna be very prominent, I would just use alphas and you know, and that's it. But if it's something that is like a feature piece and is quite prominent, perhaps just splitting everything into, like I showed you at the beginning of this stream, just splitting everything into different polygroups and then use Dynamesh with groups. That's probably one way to do it that I can think of from the top of my head. But it really depends, and this is kind of like, unfortunately, my answer to a lot of the things that I could ask. It really depends on the project. It really depends on the intention of it. So if this creature, for example, this character that I'm doing, was not to be purely a concept, if it was meant to be a production character and it was already approved the design and I went through the process and I need to build this, I would approach the same the same creature, the same character in a different way, just because the ultimate goal and the deliverable is going to be different. So yeah, it's hard to give you an answer. I can give you some tips, but it's hard to give you an answer without knowing exactly what the intention is. So yeah, I'm gonna use some of the masking brushes here. So masking brushes, masking tools in ZBrush. In fact, I'm gonna use one that again, there's a whole tutorial in my YouTube channel if you wanna see how I use this. But I'm gonna click on compute. This is a button that comes from the Z plugin palette, from the ambient occlusion, the ray trace ambient occlusion in ZBrush. So it's part of the new addition to ZBrush, and it generates a super nice and clean ambient occlusion. But the best thing about it is that it's not just a visual ambient occlusion or a preview. It is an actual mask. So it creates a super nice mask or nice ambient occlusion that is actually a mask. So what I have here is actually a mask. I can hide it, right? But it's a really nice ambient occlusion. So I can invert that, right? And I can just work on, maybe go for a think it's kind of like a, I can work on these areas and just do very quickly a pass like this, right? And it's only applying this really nice color into the crevice, or not crevices, but basically the areas that the ambient occlusion, the ray trace ambient occlusion is giving me. So that's an awesome addition to the recent versions of ZBrush. In case you didn't know, there is an actual ray trace ambient occlusion included into the C plugin. So if you click on C plugin, it's called ambient occlusion, this one right here. So I put this button, you see it gets highlighted when I hover over it. So that's the button that I have in here in my UI now. That allows me to do, and I use that for a lot of different things, not just for poly painting. It's a great tool. For instance, you can combine that, like the ambient occlusion, with the what's the name? So ambient occlusion, you can combine the ambient occlusion and then use this brush. I forgot the name. Contrast delta or contrast target. So that will increase the details. Like, yeah, will bring the details closer. Not closer. It sharpens the details really. So once you restrict the areas that you can add those details, it just becomes like a really cool effect. I don't have time to show you, but it's an awesome thing. So yeah, I use this quite a bit. So I'm just painting this color, and I'm gonna clear the mask. But you see that just that little tip, that little hint, it brings this to a whole new level. And of course, you can keep refining this thing. I'm gonna do the same thing for the ears. Shouldn't take that long. There we go. So yeah, pretty subtle, but very, very powerful stuff. And after that, you can just clear the mask and walk through, or not walk through, but go through the process of refining the placement of those colors. I'm just making these areas a little bit more dirtier. And then if you want to variate things, I know that my time is up. Oh, I've already went over 10 minutes, so let's just quickly finish this up with something like the peaks and valleys, for example. If you click peaks and valleys, and in this case it's pretty smooth actually. Let's use smoothness. Nah, I'm gonna have to use peak and valleys, but I'm gonna change the range to 25 and the coverage as well. So I'm just playing around with the coverage and the range to create a different masking, and I'm gonna adjust that mask, sharpen it a little bit, maybe something like that. Blur the mask a tiny bit, and invert the mask, or let's not invert it, let's keep it like that. And I'm gonna use a lighter color. So I kind of like protected that area, or certain areas. Let's wait until ZBrush finishes saving. And I'm just gonna go very quickly over certain areas with a lighter color, but I have the mask, so I cannot paint in all the areas. So this is another way to variate that that base color. Again, this is a little bit more in depth in the tutorial that I have in the ZBrush guides if you want to have a look at it. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Here is our scroll work in progress again. Something that we're gonna continue working later on. Hopefully, I think it's looking all right. So for the amount of time that we had today, it's a good concept. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do some quick render and share it online. Once again, guys, if you're interested, the extra mile is open, but it's going to be open just for a few days. Simply go to the 3D Concept Artist website, this one right here. You can check out the entire the entire modules and the entire program is there. You can see what the students are doing, incredible work. There's some recent updates as well. So I covered my whole process, beginning with some of the fundamentals like the character design, like composition, lighting, how I treat the characters as compositions. So all of these things in the first module. there is we dedicate a whole module to sculpting, but then we move into rendering for work in progress, texturing with Substance Painter. Well, now it's called 3D Painter, but we use Substance Painter, so the same thing. UVs, unwrapping, all that sort of thing, retopology, advanced texturing, all that sort of good stuff, and finalizing with render and compositing. And then there are some additional modules, like complete full-on lessons that I've added for specific workflows like hard surface. So in this one, I cover how I did like certain things for this character that you sort of see there. It's like a hard surface thing, and the focus on alternative software to rendering. So this is an update that covers Blender Eve, Blender Cycles, Maverick Render, and Adobe Dimension, which is now called the 3D Stager, which is pretty awesome. So again, feel free. There's also bonus modules as well. So there is access to the private community for live, and there is an extra module which is called the Art of Living as an Artist. And this is an interesting module that I cover a few different things like productivity, how to organize, when you have like lots of projects and you're learning stuff, or in general, how to organize my life in a way and track my time and that sort of thing. So that all of that is part of the same course. If you're interested, again, I will just put a link in the chat. I'm just gonna change my setup now, and if you're interested, I would love to have you on board. All right, so I'm gonna leave it here, guys. It's been great. I think we made good progress with the Skrull character, and I will see you next time, probably in a couple of weeks. And again, if you're interested in the extra mile, it's open until Saturday night my time. All right, take it easy, guys. See you later.